Brinks. And if I know some of you, I saw the registration list, but I live in Spokane, Washington. I'm an outdoor writer, a tournament angler. I do a lot of things in the fishing industry, and really just fish quite a bit. I'm the president and co-founder of the Spokane Bass Club, two-time BFL Angler of the Year, two-time Washington State team member. And I've lived in a few different states. I've lived in Florida and Nevada, and I really am very passionate about the bass fishing that we have here. I believe it's some of the best in the country. I mean, it's very good. If you're from this area, you're lucky. And the things that we're going to cover tonight, it's going to be mostly the Pacific Northwest, but it's very similar to the Midwest. Even the Northeast. I mean, a lot of the natural lakes are going to fish kind of similar, especially during the summer. A couple quick things. Anytime you have questions, just feel free to send them off. I'll see them when they come through. If it's something that I see and it's relevant to what I'm talking about right then, we'll do it right then. If not, we'll answer questions all the way at the end. It will be recorded. That's another thing. And it will also be put on YouTube for the Navionics YouTube page, and then also my YouTube page. So we'll get that up, the next day or so. But we're going to go ahead and get started here with a quick poll. And we'll just go ahead and do that and kind of see where you guys live. Good to know. Again, the question is, what state do you live in? It's either Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, or other. There's quite a few others, which is good. And like I said, there's going to be a lot of things specifically about Northwest Lakes, but it's going to apply to a lot of places that are very similar. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Like I said, summer bass fishing in the Pacific Northwest. Okay, it looks like it's up. Okay, so we're gonna go over the agenda real quick. We're gonna kind of talk about my summer approach, bait selection, locations. I mean, because that's one of the most important things in all of fishing. You have to be in the right spot. I mean, baits matter, but location I think is even more important. I'm gonna talk about night fishing, something I like doing quite a bit. Talk about fish care. This is the time of year when fish are more susceptible to dying from the hot weather and being caught deep. So I'll just go over a quick few tips that I have for that, and then we'll get into the Q&A. Okay, so in the summer, the biggest thing for me is to find some type of current. It's pretty easy if you're on a river system or a lake that has creeks flowing into it. But one thing that a lot of people don't realize is there's current all the time from waves and boat wakes. I mean, all those things do the same thing that current does. Like a natural stream or river. So, finding those areas where there's tons of wakeboarders and things like that, typically bass fishermen hate that. They hate seeing all these pleasure boaters going all over the place. But I found that really helps a lot of times, especially if it's really hot out or if there's no wind at all. That kind of stuff really stirs up the fish, stirs up the bait fish, and then gets the bass aggressive. So, those wakeboarders may be helping you out a little bit. Obviously they are kind of annoying at times, but it definitely helps, in a populated area. And, my theory on that, those fish that live in that area that are used to a lot of boat traffic, around boat ramps and around parks and things like that, I think they get used to the boats constantly going through, and they kind of use that to their advantage. So that's kind of my theory on it. But, finding current is key, like whether it's what you think of as current or wind or something else. The other thing that is always a good thing to do in the summer is to find humps and islands. You can do that with help of mapping, Google Earth. There's a lot of ways to find those offshore spots. Points are also very good in the summer. Really, they're good all the time, but especially in the summer for me. And then grass. Grass is huge in the summer. Well, really most of the time it's obviously going to be the most grass during the summer, but it's a great thing to key on. My theory and my approach is shallow in the morning and then, head out deeper in the afternoon. That's kind of how I approach it. But it can be different. Shade if staying shallow, and docks. And we're going to talk about all those things. All right, so like I said, current is very big during the summer. So if you could find it and there's not current everywhere, those areas you're gonna find fish, because like I was saying earlier, stirs up the bait fish, it's cooler water. Everything about current is good during the summer. It's definitely one of the first things I look for anywhere I go. Now, when there's current, this is kind of my approach and the baits that I use most. Typically I'm going to use a faster moving bait first, crankbait, spinner bait. I actually put spinner baits on there twice. That's supposed to be swim baits. Those are the three things that I use quite a bit if I'm fishing fast. Tubes and jigs. Drop shot's another good one. But you might get hung up quite a bit. So that's kind of goes back to why I like those fast moving baits. If there's a lot of rocks, you're not going to hang up as much. Now, I said always cast upstream, and I put the quotes on it because it's not always true, but in my experience, you always want to be casting upstream and letting the bait come back down naturally. I see a lot of people that are going downstream with the current. I'm sure they'll catch a fish or two, but my experience is it's better to be casting upstream at all time, no matter how fast the current is, no matter how much of a pain it is. That boat positioning is so important. You want to be facing the current and going into the current and casting up. And if it's fast current, just turn up your trolling motor, because again, that's what the fish are used to, and that's the way they're positioning themselves, is looking upstream for something to flow by them. So you can go downstream with the current if you want, but I think you're just going to have a lot better luck going facing into the current. Okay, so again, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to just send them off. Oh, hold on a second here. Okay, sorry about that. But yeah, if you have any questions, just let me know and we'll get to them. Okay, perfect. Okay, so that's kind of my approach for current. So humps and islands, they always attract, especially during the summer. And looking at different tools, they're pretty easy to find. This is a map of Banks Lake, which is in Washington State, and you can see this hump comes up quite a bit. Everything around it's 40 feet, and it's 20 feet up on top. So this is a very good hump. I just kind of looked at it. I have fished this hump, and there are fish summer and winter. This is a great spot to catch them. Okay, when it comes to bait selection, one of my first things that I pick up is a deep crankbait. Football heads is another one. Either it's going to be a hula grub on a, like a half-ounce football head, or a skirted football head, more of a traditional football head. Top water as well, if it's shallow enough, and I would say less than about 10 feet or so, I'll still be using top water. They will come up from deeper than that, but that's kind of my rule of thumb. And then drop shot, of course. And, I'm going to kind of go over a few things with drop shot. This is taken from my drop shot presentation that we did earlier in the year. And I get a lot of questions about this, and it's about the equipment that I use, the rods, reels, bait. So we're going to just go over that real quick. And, maybe it's something you haven't tried, and it may help you out wherever you live. Okay, so, when I'm selecting a drop shot rod and reel, the thing that I always look for with the drop shot rod is the length and the action. Any good spinning rod will work for a drop shot. Even bait casting will work. But I prefer a rod that's 7 foot or longer, just to get a little bit longer cast. And then when it comes to action, I'm a person that uses a lot lighter action than a lot of people. I always go with a medium light, and that allows me to, I feel, cast it further, feel more bites, just everything. Play big fish on light line. There's a lot of benefits to that medium light action. And then sensitivity. Obviously you want to be able to feel the bite, so get the most sensitive rod that you can. Keys to a good drop shot reel. Number one being good drag. Like I was talking about with that action of that rod, you want to have, if you're playing big fish on light line, you got to have good drag. And not too big, or not too small. So if you're a Shimano person, a 2500 size is what I use. And then if you're using something like an Abu Garcia, which is another one I use, it's going to be a 20 or 30 size. Those are the best sizes that I use for drop shot fishing. And they give you plenty of line, so you can make really long casts. They really hold a lot of that light braid, so you're good to go. You obviously want a smooth retrieve, but really just get whatever you can afford. If it's a $75 reel, or if it's a $475 reel, just get whatever you can afford that has all these characteristics, and you'll be able to, do well with drop shot fishing, because it's crucial for summertime fishing. I think every slide that I'm going to show you is has drop shot mentioned somewhere because it works excellent during the summertime. So rod and reel, these are two of my rod and reel setups. I got the Abu Garcia Villain 2.0. This is 7-foot medium light. And then this is an Abu Garcia Revo MGX size 20. And then this is a Phoenix Ultra MBX, again, 7-foot medium light. And then this is a Fluger. This is a Fluger Patriarch, I believe is what it's called. Excellent reels. Both of them fit what I was talking about. And, these do the majority of my drop shot fishing work. I have several drop shot rods because I use it all the time. But these are two that I use quite a bit. And, just 20-pound braid. And, some people think that's really heavy, but the Seagar Smackdown, which is what this is very, very thin. You're talking like a 6-pound diameter. So you can go with a heavier line. And then I join it with a 8-pound Seagar Tatsu fluorocarbon. And that is going to be combined with what I found to be the best braid to fluorocarbon knot. And that's the modified Albright. Some people call it the Crazy Alberto. I'm not really sure which is the correct one, but if you search for both of those, you should be able to find it. Go on YouTube. This is a quick diagram. Basically you just wrap it down 6 times. This is 7, and then back up the same way, 7 or 6. There's a lot of variance on the magic number of wraps, but definitely check out some YouTube videos on how to tie this knot because it's awesome. It works very good. And I found it to be a lot easier and faster to tie than just about any other one that I've seen. Okay. All right, we're gonna see if you guys have any more questions. Okay, hold on one second, bear with me here. Okay, cool. We're gonna stop here real quick. I got a question. Okay, and again, this is a good time if you have some, just shoot them off, and we'll get to them. Okay, Neil asks, small lake, no current in eastern Washington, deep drops, 6 to 15 feet, with tules, cattails. Use Senko's some success in low light, but what I found during the middle of the day, but what about during the middle of the day? And he said he's having very little success with good sized largemouth. It's gonna kind of depend on this if there's any grass, and if there is, I'm gonna tell you a few things about grass fishing here coming up. But another good thing, and we'll talk about this too, but it's a topwater bait in the middle of the day. And, a lot of people just only throw it in the first light or right before it gets dark. But I found that it catches big fish in the middle of the day. For some reason, I don't know if people aren't throwing it, but it's a great way to catch big ones. Something like a big super spook. That might be a good option for you. You're definitely not going to catch as many little tiny ones as you would with other baits. So, I would definitely try a super spook or a big topwater bait like that. But if there is grass, the slides that we're going to go over here coming up, I think will definitely help you out. Okay, good question. And Neil, feel free to send me an email, and any of you guys, it's tbrinks@navionics.com, and maybe tell me what lake it is, and I might be able to, maybe I fished it or something. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go back to this one. Okay. Okay, so like I said, this is a great knot. It's awesome. So definitely check that out. I used to tie the double uni, and it's a great knot. I've never broke any fish off, but I found that you'll actually break off when you hang up, whereas this one you won't. If you get hung up in a rock or something, this one your leader will break before the knot does, which I think is the ultimate goal. So definitely check this one out. Okay, just quick thing on some drop shot baits, and we'll talk about some of the different baits as well. Then we'll get into some of my other favorite techniques during the summer. This is always a topic. There's a lot of drop shot weights on the market, a lot of styles, round, the cylinder, the teardrop right here, there's tungsten. I found that really I don't use the round very much anymore. They are good. They're pretty easy to find, but they really hang up quite a bit on grass. They do work good in sand. The teardrop is an excellent choice for grass and rock. The cylinder is another one that works very, very well. And this one will actually will hang up quite a bit if the rocks are small, but I found that most of the time I'm using a cylinder and teardrop as well. And then there's tungsten as well. If you're fishing somewhere where there's not a lot of rock and maybe you're fishing pretty shallow, tungsten might be a better option for you. So that's just a quick overview on the drop shot weights. Okay, drop shot baits. As you can see, there's a ton of them. I use a lot of robo worms, either the straight tail, the sculpin, the Rain's bubbling shaker, a lot of Biovex baits, Berkeley baits, Kitech. I mean, there's the point of all this is there's no wrong answer for what you're going to use on a drop shot. The only thing I always tell people is not to have a curly tail worm because your line's going to twist quite a bit. You can do it, but it's more hassle than it's worth for me. Now here's a few of them that I was talking about. This is a Kitech Easy Shiner, the Power Bait Twitch Tail Minnow, Kitech 6 Impact, Havoc Moneymaker, and then a good old Robo Worm. All these are awesome during the summer. There's one. This is a bait that the Biovex Colt Fishtail. This one works very, very good too. Okay, so moving along to my other favorite thing to do during the summer, and that's cranking. And the reason I like cranking is it is one of the best ways to cover water. And sometimes during the summer up here, you need to be covering water because the fish may be only in certain areas. So really all the time, cranking does that for you. You can fish as deep as you want, relatively. You can fish down to 30 feet, super shallow to very deep. And I found that this is probably the best way to catch a big one during the summer. And, going back to your question, Neil, cranking might be another option for you as well. There's a lot of small cranks that can get deep, and I'll show you a couple of those that I use, especially this time of year up here. Okay, so this is first going to a little bit deeper. This is it's called a IMA Beast Hunter, and this one gets down to about 13, 14 feet, but this is a good mid-range crankbait, and that's a very good color for up here. That's actually taken at Newman Lake, if you guys are from around here, and it works very good. You can see there's some teeth marks on it, and this is the first day I tried it. So when it comes to those shallow cranks that get deep, like I was talking about, this is a Strike King 3XD, and I believe this is a 5XD, but this 3XD especially works very good during the summer, especially late in the summer around the Pacific Northwest. For some reason, that small profile that can get down to 10 feet is excellent. I do fish it on this 10-pound line. This is in VizX, so it can get down there a lot quicker with that lighter diameter. That's something that a lot of people don't maybe pay attention to as much, but the line diameter and the pound test makes a huge difference in how deep your crankbait can get. But late in the summer, this 3XD is hard to beat. Okay, so the other big point of, not really, didn't mean that one, but point of location is actually points. So, this is at Banks Lake in Washington State, and this is an area that you guys might be familiar with, but, the great thing that I see here is there's lots of points. So if you find a certain point that's working, you're able to jump from point to point to point, and you could do that. And once you find what depth the fish are on, what bait they want, you can really replicate it very quickly, especially if the lake has a lot of points. So points are one of the best things to look for during the summer, really anywhere. And it could be rocky points like this. It could be round, shallow points that just get a little bit deeper. I mean, there's a lot of variation depending on what type of lake you're fishing, but any type of point is going to be a good thing to start. And a lot of people fish them, but a lot of fish are there. So, you kind of have the percentage gain. There's going to be just about everybody jumping on those points, but there's going to be a lot of fish in those areas. Okay, when it comes to bait selection, it's pretty similar to, what I've kind of already talked about. There's really not too many secrets out there, but, these are the ones that I reach for first. Crankbaits, those football heads with hula grubs, drop shot, of course, jigs, like either a skirted football head or just a standard casting jig. They work great on points, and then top water. That's an excellent choice. So here you go. This is what happens when you fish points, and this is about 30 feet of water on a football head. So there's big ones. It doesn't have to be only little ones. I mean, there's big fish out deep in 30 feet of water in the summer. This was, I believe, in August up here. Okay, moving along, I'm going to talk about grass. And, I love fishing grass. Like I said earlier, I lived in Florida, so I learned a lot about it. And my first choice, that's why I have this picture of my frog box, is it's going to be frogs. If there's grass of any type, if it's lily pads or milfoil or anything, or even some kind of just trash blown together that, chopped up grass, frog is going to be an awesome choice, especially those shallow grassy lakes. So frogs, like I said, number one. And punching, again, I put this in quotes because, there's not major punching like there is in other parts of the country, but you can still do it. There's not too many places where you need like a 2-ounce weight with a small soft plastic like a beaver or something like that, but a 1 ounce will pretty much cover everything you're going to see in the Pacific Northwest and lakes like it. One other approach that I always do is pitching deep weed lines or pad lines. Those are pretty easy to find. Pad lines are very visual, so you could see them. Just head out to the deeper side of them, the deepest water you can, and start pitching the deep pad lines. They don't grow as deep, so you're looking at probably 5 to 10 feet at the max is where you're going to be on the outside of them. Deep weed lines are going to be a little bit deeper. They can be deeper, down to 20 feet or so, but you can still pitch those, even though there's not something to the surface, even though they're down 15 or 20 feet, you can still pitch to the edges of them, with jigs and Texas rigworms and things like that. The other top bait selections, choices for grass is spinner baits and swim baits. I like to throw spinner baits where, just a standard double willow, chartreuse and white, anything that looks like a bluegill, anything like that will work. Swim baits, and typically I'm talking about the hollow belly style, something like a Berkeley hollow belly or a Strike King Shadowlicious. 5-inch I found to be just about perfect size for both getting a lot of bites and catching fish, because if you throw the 6-inch or 7-inch, you're not gonna get as many bites. You may get a few bigger ones, but you're not going to catch as many. Whereas like if you're going down to like a 4-inch, you might catch a lot, but they're going to be a lot smaller. So I found that 5-inch is the perfect size for me, at least. Okay, I'm going to talk about a couple frog modifications real quick. I got one of my frogs here. It's the one seen in the picture. So as you can see from this one, it's the same frog. This is a snag-proof Ish's fat frog. And you can see I trimmed the legs kind of crazy on, first I trim them shorter, and then I make one side smaller than the other. And this is going to allow it to walk side to side a lot better. So that's one thing you can do to make it walk a lot better. And you can get a little bit different action than just popping it on the surface. So that's a great trick to do. Pretty easy to do. Just trim it and, start a little bit longer and find the right length for you. This kind of reminded me, I wrote an article on this in the last couple of weeks, and the 5 things that I do to modify the frogs. Trim your legs, add some noise. You can add a rattle inside of it, or even a craft bell. That's a great way to add some more noise, because a lot of times when they're coming through the grass, they just kind of miss it. If you fished a frog long enough, that happens. So that's a great way to help them zone in on it a little bit better. Also upgrading and changing your hooks. Some of them, the hooks get dull really quick, or they are just cheap hooks. So you can get a hook from Gamakatsu, the double EWG frog hook. It's pretty easy to change. So just kind of play around with that. You just pull the hook out. There's a little ring there connecting the line tie and the hook, and swap it out. You could also add a trailer hook. There's actually ones on the market for frogs, so you get a few more of those bites. And then another thing I do quite a bit is changing the color. Either using a marker to tone it down a little bit. If it's bright yellow underbelly and you want to kind of tone it down a little bit, you can add some stripes. You can just marker it up, and rubbing alcohol will actually pull some of that off. So it's not a permanent thing. All right, so let's see if we got any other questions here. Okay, cool. Got some more questions. Okay. All right, so I'm used to fishing California lakes like Oroville, which is a steep sided canyon reservoir and tends to be very deep. I'd like to know if the topography is similar to the Washington lakes using your examples. You know, the lake I showed with the points, Banks Lake, it's very similar. You know, because it's deep rocky areas. You know, I haven't fished Oroville, but I fished Shasta, but I know that they have a lot of points, and I'd say that's probably the closest to it. So a lot of these, you know, I'm talking about the points and things like that. Yeah, it's going to be very relevant to what I was talking about here, or you know, to what you're experiencing. Okay, another good question is how far off is your boat when you're pitching deep weed lines, especially in clear water? You know, that it's kind of tricky. It depends on how, um, I'd say how well you can see them, and also how well you can pitch too. Because you know, if you can pitch a long ways and you could stay back 20, 30 feet, you know, I would definitely do that. But if not, you know, you're just going to get as close as you can, you know, and typically those fish in clear water, when they're down 10, 15 feet, you know, if they're buried into the grass and you pitch it just right and it falls right down below, beside those weed lines, you know, they'll come out and get it. You know, they might not be as boat shy as you think, because they're usually buried into the edge of the grass or cruising the weed line. So it's just going to depend on how far. Okay, good question. Got another one. Do you swim the jigs and crankbaits through the grass as well, or just along the edge? You know, I do use a swim jig. Typically, I use it a lot more during the spring, but an actual swim jig is a good choice during the summer as well. But typically, when I'm talking about jigs and grass, I'm going to be pitching to the edge of them with a standard casting jig or a pitching jig, like an Arky style. You know, with crankbaits, you know, if you have a certain depth and your crankbait dives to just above the grass, you know, that's ideal, because hitting it through the grass obviously is going to get tangled up too much. So if the grass, if you're in, here's an example, say it's 10 feet deep and the grass comes up 2 feet, and you got a fish that a crankbait that dives about 8 feet, you know, that's going to be a good choice, because it's the deepest it's going to get is going to be just above that grass. So that's kind of what I would say on that. Good question. Okay. Okay, and again, guys, just keep sending them. We'll take another little break here in a minute and get those questions answered. Okay. Okay, shallow in the morning. Like I was saying, this is kind of my approach in the morning, is go as shallow as you can, because that often is the time when they're going to be feeding. You know, they're feeding at night, which we'll talk about night fishing in a minute, but they're still going to be hanging around shallow in the morning. So top water is a great choice. And you'll notice I mentioned top water quite a bit, because I think that's, besides drop shot, is probably the most important thing to use. And crankbaits, I mean, in the summer, I mean, those, if I had to pick 3 rods in the summer in the Northwest, it'd be drop shot rod, crankbait, and a top water. Hollow belly swim baits, you know, I talked about those a little bit, you know, and my thoughts on size, but that's a great way to catch a big one in the morning. Jigs as well, Senkos, and earlier the better. You know, that's, you know, they always say early bird gets the worm. You know, this time of year, you got to be on the water, you know, 5 o'clock at the, you know, it's plenty light then. So the earlier you can get out, the better, especially if you're going to be fishing shallow. Okay, and I'm going to give you an example of a place that I fish quite a bit. So as you can see, this is a great option, because it has shallow water, deep water, and this area also has a lot of current. So we'll go back real quick. So, you know, typically during the morning, they're going to be up on these types of flats, shallow areas, feeding, and then dip back down. So this is just one example. And if you notice, you know, there's all these different colors on here. This is taken from the Navionics web app, and you could also do this with your graph if you have an Navionics card, or the mobile app. And what I've done here is I've changed the different colors. So it's adjusting the different depth ranges, so certain colors stand out a little bit more. So I found that that's a lot easier for me to find those shallow areas. It's very easy to do. And if you guys have any questions about that, again, just shoot me an email or look it up on YouTube. There's actually some videos on that as well. Yeah, there's actually one of my videos on there as well. Okay. So shallow in the morning, you know, this is, like I said, it's very shallow. This is a little bit later morning, but, you know, again, they're still going to hit top water. around docks and things like that. This is a Lucky Craft Sammy. This is one of my top baits as well. Okay, docks is another thing that I always key on in the summer. You know, there's a lot of ways to fish them. There's a lot of variance between how shallow the docks are. So finding the right dock is very important. And I'll show you one thing you can do with the help of mapping as well to kind of save you some time. I'll show you that on, I believe it's the next slide. Yeah, it is. Okay, so jigs are awesome for docks. You know, pitching the sides of docks, pitching the deep end, skipping under them. There's really no wrong way to fish a jig on docks, and I think that'd be my first choice at every dock. You know, same thing with drop shot. You know, you could do a lot with that as well. You know, you could drop shot the deep posts. You know, you could fish them up shallow. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do with drop shot around docks. You know, one thing I learned to do, and it's really helped me, is learning to skip a bait effectively, because they're going to be in the deepest, darkest crevice a lot of times. So a standard cast may not get to those fish. So learning to skip is vital. And you know, you're gonna backlash, you're gonna miss, you're gonna hit docks, hit boats, things like that. It's just gonna take some practice, but I think it's one of the most important things in the summer where I live, and really anywhere there's docks, is to be able to skip. You know, another thing that people don't do as much is topwater, and you could fish those. You could use those shady sides in the middle of the hot summer day, and if there's a little bit of shade, and you could cast right along the dock and then work that topwater right where it's a little bit of shade. You know, you'll catch fish on topwater. You know, those fish are up there feeding on bluegill, feeding on little bass, feeding on trout, whatever, and you know, they're looking to eat a lot of times. So you know, if they're not way in the dark crevice like I was talking about, you know, topwater is a good way to get them. Also crankbaits too. You know, those deep dock posts. You know, some of the docks that I fish, you know, are 20 feet deep, and you know, those posts, you know, they're 15 feet. You can crankbait along those as well. And those deep docks, you can fish those all day long. And like I said, I'm going to show you a quick thing on how you can quickly determine depths of docks using mapping. So what I'm going to show you here, this is a series of docks on a lake. And you'll notice there's blue area here. This kind of goes back to that shading that I was talking about. And there's no blue area here. So me looking at this, you know, sitting in my basement, I can tell that this area is a lot deeper. These docks are a lot deeper than these docks, just because of there's blue. You can see it's 4 feet, 7 feet. You know, there's no depth on this contour, but it's going to be, I'm going to say it's 10 feet right here on these docks, because it's 12 there. So it's a great tool. And these they are 1 foot contour intervals. So actually it's 11, 10, and it's gonna be a lot deeper than these 4 and 7. So that's a quick way you can do it. You can mark them on your app, and you'll know which ones to target if you're looking for those deep docks. Okay, like I said, I was going to talk about fish care a little bit. You know, this time of year, fish die because, especially if you're in a tournament, you know, because it's warm temps, you know, in that deep water, you know, you need to take extra care of them. Now, a lot of guys I know that they always put ice on their fish, you know, in the live well, and I've heard it both ways. But everything that the consensus is that, you know, ice is good, but you don't want to put too much in there because you don't want to shock them. If it's, you know, 80 degrees in your live well and you pour a bunch of ice and it's 60 all of a sudden, you could actually do more harm than good. So I'd say just don't put too much in there. You know, there's a lot of live well treatments, you know, things like G juice, used to be called, I think, O2 or something like that, but it's a good way to keep your fish alive. You know, and another thing is fizzing fish when you're 20 feet or deeper, you know, with those needles, you know, and I kind of found myself not using them as much now that I use these flip clips. You just stick these on the fin of the fish and it keeps them upright, and their air bladder kind of has a chance to readjust. So those are a great tool, and they're really cheap. Okay, we're going to talk about night fishing a little bit too. And it's funny because, you know, I don't night fish as much as I'd like to, you know, but I was just thinking about this, preparing this presentation, and I've fished 6 night tournaments in my life, and every single one of them I've got to check. So, you know, I'm not saying I'm like a great night fisherman, but the things that and I'm going to tell you, they work, I guess, because, you know, they are producing fish during night tournaments. You know, I do change my setting on my Lowrance. This is just the color palette. And this is, I believe it's color palette 10. Yeah. And it's a lot easier to see at night. I also turned down my graphs, the brightness, because it just gets too blinding. So I definitely turn it down quite a bit. And this is, I got a night tournament coming up too, and I'm really excited about that. So I'll kind of tell you my approach, the baits that I use and things like that. So, night fishing is great because it's so hot during this time of year. And, there's a lot of fish that feed at night when there's so much boat activity. And I know it's kind of going against what I said earlier, but they're more in a feeding mode at night during the summer. You're on the water, and typically there's not many people out there. So kind of first thing I always say is safety first. And, I am very careful at night. I use black lights, headlamps, wear my life vest. I don't drive full speed at night just because I don't want any trouble. I mean, you might be a log floating or anything like that. But, kind of going into, more of the fishing side of things, I like to fish shallow during the night time, because the fish are roaming and looking for food. They're going to be up shallow. Those small bluegill and things like that, they don't know what's coming. So it's a lot easier for the a predator fish like bass. So they're going to be all over the place looking for food. And one thing I found fishing at night is it's not as important on exactly like target, like how close you get to a target. If you're casting next to a dock, I mean, they could be anywhere around the dock. You don't have to have it a perfect skip or perfect pitch or anything like that. They're going to find the bait. So that's one nice thing about night fishing is you can, be a little bit, you don't have to be the best caster. You might hang up on docks and things like that, but you'll still catch fish even if it's not right next to a dock. One thing I always do is I'm very, very quiet at night because it is so quiet at night that those fish can hear everything at night. So silence is key. That's something I'm, really honestly, it's something I always am mindful for. I don't drop pliers in the middle of the boat. I'm careful when I shut down the lids of, my rod lockers and glove box and things like that. But, at night, I'm even more so. But, that's kind of something I've always thought, you just don't want to let the fish know you're there, especially at night. So going into bait selection, here we go again, top water. That's one, it's the most fun, I think, at night because it's, you hear that splash and you don't know how big the fish is, where it is. I mean, it's just awesome when they hit something at night. The other one of my favorite night fishing baits is a chatterbait. It just works great just because it has so much vibration. Big worms, big jigs. You could use all braid too if you want. I mean, you don't really have to be. The fish aren't gonna be too line shy at night. So those big baits are great. And this is actually one time that I'll actually use monofilament. Typically I'm going to use braid, like I was just talking about, or fluorocarbon. But there is a place for just straight monofilament during the night. And I think it's the biggest reason is it's easy to see if you have a black light. I mean, it just glows. I mean, I don't know if you ever tried that before, but try it sometime. Have a black light and some, clear blue mono or something like that, and it just stands out. So it's a lot easier to detect those bites. Also spinner baits. This is a spinner bait that I use at night. This one right here, I actually just got this one, but it's a very similar to what I use. It's a all black, the big giant Colorado blade, and this is just going to have a lot more action, a lot more vibration at night. This is actually a 3/4 ounce too, so I mean it's gonna be a big thumping bait. Excited about that one. And all black, you think it's kind of goes against what people think, or what you would think maybe, that it's so dark that you want something that is a little bit lighter for them to see, but that black silhouette works great, for them to be able to find it. One of my other baits that's not mentioned here that I've done really well on at night is a wacky rig, and just all black Senko, and it just falls, and something about it up against the moonlight, it's one of the best baits at night in my opinion. But along with all these are all top producers for me. Okay, well, it looks like we kind of breezed through it a little bit. So, like I said, this is actually my last webinar of the season. I've had 6, so I thank you guys for attending my other ones. We're getting into the Q&A in just a second. But these are some ways to get a hold of me afterwards. Like I said, that's my email. You can also reach me at my Facebook page, at Twitter, Instagram. I mean, you guys can see it. You can read. So any of those are good ways to get a hold of me, and I love to hear your feedback and get some more specifics. If you have specific questions, I'll be sure to answer them. We'll see if we got any questions. Okay, none yet. You guys are kind of quiet tonight, but it's fine. Like I said, if you guys have any questions afterwards, I'd be happy to answer them. So make sure I didn't miss any of them. Good. I thought you guys were all gonna have Oh, here you go. Oh yeah, good question, Neil. What color big worms at night? And still black if you're dragging on the bottom. Yeah, still I still use all black, even though that one of the benefits of black against the moonlight is that silhouette, but still something black or something very dark like a June bug. I still found that is the best. Even jigs, all black. I mean, it just seems to do so much better at night. But definitely, if you haven't night fished much, it's an awesome way to beat the heat if it's that hot, or to just get out there and you know just try something different. It's a lot of fun. Okay, all right, guys, give it another minute or so. But like I said, I appreciate all you guys for taking time out of your evening. Okay, cool. Got some more questions. Okay, Jim, he asks, do you use a ball bearing swivel or pivoting type drop shot hook? And the answer, I don't use either of those. The swivel is, something a lot of people use to prevent line twist. And I found that it actually, just by using braid with a fluorocarbon leader, you're going to reduce a lot of those, that line twist already. So you don't really have to worry about as much. Now with the hook question, I don't use any of the pivoting type. I just use I use two different types of hooks for drop shot. If I'm nose hooking, it's going to be a Gamakatsu split shot drop shot hook, and a size 1 almost all the time. And if I'm Texas rigging it, it's a Gamakatsu G-lock hook, and that's what I'm actually going to Texas rig the worm. Let's see if I have any on my table over there. That's what I'm going to use, and that's also in a size 1 as well. Okay, I'm fishing a 50-acre shallow water grass lake. Okay, watched your webinar and caught a few small fish with a roboworm and a wacky rig Senko. What would you do from there? I would, if you're catching just small fish, it could be either the location, could be the lake. Maybe there's just not a lot of big ones in there, but maybe try a bigger bait. Maybe try a 6-inch roboworm if you were using the smaller one. You could even try a 7-inch and wacky rig that. Try that as well. That's a good way to catch a big one. Or even their fat robos. That's another one that I use quite a bit, and that does seem to catch fatter or bigger fish sometimes. Oh, okay, good question about Shasta. And how can you specifically target largemouth in a lake where they're the dominant species? And that's a question that could apply to a lot of lakes up here, where smallmouth are the dominant species. Like Long Lake here where I live, smallmouth are by far the dominant species. But if you're targeting largemouth, it's can be challenging, honestly. Like I fished Shasta, I probably fished it about 10 days, and I don't know if I've ever caught a largemouth there. So there's really just not a lot in there. But anytime you have flooding or anything like that, where you can get up shallow in the bushes, or I know there's not a lot of bushes there because it draws down so much. But anything like that where you can get up shallow and pitch, I think is probably your best bet. But that's a tough question. Like I said, it's kind of like a lake that I fish quite a bit, where smallmouth are the dominant species. Just being shallow and where the largemouth are going to be is really your best bet there, I think. Okay. Kind of follow up to the question I just asked or answered before about the shallow lake. And he said he caught a few fish, and he's in Florida. So to answer your question, that again, you go even bigger in Florida. I mean, you could use a 10-inch worm. You could try that drop shot fishing. It sounds crazy, but in Florida, they're used to eating big things. I've caught 10-inch bass on 10-inch worms. but you also catch a lot of big ones as well. So give that a shot. Upsize everything. And that might be your key there. Yeah, this is a good question about night fishing. Does it after fishing at dark? Does it take a while to get going after the initial evening bite? Yes, definitely. I found that there's almost always like a dead period. If it gets dark at 9 o'clock, you might not catch another one until 11 o'clock. It's like they're full from that evening bite. So I found that to happen just about every time I fish at night. There are a lot of lulls, especially right after it gets dark. I mean, I'm not saying that's always the case, but I've seen it. I think every single time I fished at night. So it yeah, like I said, it's either they're full or they just I don't know exactly what it is, but it does seem to be that maybe their eyes are adjusting, or I have no idea. I mean, it does happen though. So, but then there's flurries that it might be midnight and all of a sudden they just turn on and they will bite like crazy for an hour or two. So it's definitely an interesting dynamic at night. But I have seen that, and I do agree. Okay, thanks, Neil. Thanks for attending. Okay, well, we're gonna get off of here, but we will be again putting this on YouTube, so you guys can check it out later. And again, if you have any questions, just let me know.